Sacred Harmony, where stillness meets soul and healing becomes holy. Today's guest, Leah Chrest, is no stranger to the inward journey. From grief to grace, she's walked the path of transformation through meditation, surrender, and spiritual practice. In this episode, we explore how forgiveness, rhythm, and divine connection can shift our entire experience of life. Welcome to the show, Leah. It's an honor to have you.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. So, Leah, what sparked your understanding of forgiveness as a spiritual practice rather than just a moral one?
Wow, that's beautiful. So, forgiveness to me is realizing that the other person is not separate from you, that we all have the divine within us. And so, there is that sense of unity versus separation. And forgiveness is realizing that who you are at the core can never be harmed by anything or anyone. That sense of our eternal nature is completely safe, and that everything that happens um, that can be perceived as harmful is done out of a sense of a false belief and separation from each other. I love to give the example of my father when I was a child. He told me there was a time that um, overnight, he woke up in the middle of a dream and thought that my mother was an attacker in his bedroom. And he tried to strangle her because he was unaware that it was his wife. He thought this was this violent attacker in his room and he was going after her. And thank goodness she woke him up and she was fine. She was safe. And, it wouldn't be hard as my mother to forgive my father because my father was unaware of what he was doing. He was in a dream and he was not aware of who she was. And so to me, forgiveness is being able to see, look, like Jesus says in the Gospels, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. The people who are hurting us or when we hurt somebody else, we're not aware of what we're doing. And when we can see that, it helps to ease forgiveness. Forgiveness is not excusing a behavior or saying it's okay. It's just saying where you're coming from is a place of hurt and misunderstanding and illusion. It's not the truth. And if you were to see the truth, this would never have happened. And I am safe in the arms of God. That's kind of where I come from with forgiveness.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. And how did forgiveness shift your own grief journey in unexpected ways?
Yes, this was something I haven't shared before. So this will be a fun one, or at least meaningful. My husband was an alcoholic, so that I have shared before. And even though he had some months of sobriety at the very end of his life, there was still a lot of hurt. And I don't think he ever officially said, I'm sorry, or we never really talked about what happened during his years of illness. And just like I talked about not knowing what he was doing, he he was in a place of alcoholism's a sickness and he was in a place of illness. He wasn't in his right mind. And it was so apparent because when he became sober, that last 4 months, it was having the husband back that I had first married. It was having that beautiful, kind soul returned. However, there was no recognition of what had happened. And so, though I could understand that who he was not that person that was very tough to live with, at the same time, there was still some lack of resolution for me. It was hard not to hear, I'm sorry, or to have that spoken to me that, hey, I recognize what you went through. And it was about a year, almost 2 years later, um, I was in a place where I heard a former alcoholic give their testimony and speak what had happened in his life and how what he had acted during his time of the illness and how his wife and children suffered during that time. And that was one of the greatest moments, most profound moments, because I felt like I had that truth spoken to me, that that pain that I felt was acknowledged. Because it's okay to say, okay, he didn't know what he was doing. He was unaware. He believed that he was in this terrible spot when he was an alcoholic, and those things that he did, it wasn't coming from his true self. I understood that, but the pain was still real. And having that opportunity to not just have a genuine heart to heart, soul to soul forgiveness, but also to have that pain acknowledged and say, okay, this happened. And the pain was real. The pain was real. And that just felt was very healing to me to hear that spoken and to acknowledge that within my story.
Hmm. And so often we think forgiveness is for the other, but you're showing us it's really about freedom for the self.
Yes,
Hmm.
absolutely. Forgiving someone else, seeing them as they're in a place where they're hurting and they need help. This isn't a purposeful act of whatever. And um, that of course is healing for the other person to be kind of let go of. But really what it does is we spend so much of our time running in our mind all these thoughts of how we're a victim of these things in our life, these people in our life, and these circumstances in our life. And those programs of victimhood keep us trapped in fear and resentment and resistance to life. When we are in a place of, I guess, open trust in the divine to make all things well in the end. And, it's one of those things we have to have that faith that it may not be okay right now. It may not feel resolved right now. There may still be lingering pain we need to acknowledge. We never want to brush that under the rug or push down our pain that we feel. We want to let that through, acknowledge it, feel that fully, like I had to do with my husband's relationship with me. I needed to go somewhere where I could hear that acknowledged and let that go. Um, However, it is that it's very freeing to let go of resentment instead of just recycling those stories over and over again, how he or she or it did that to me. To say, okay, what's my response? Am I going to hold on to that? Or am I going to look at the beautiful things in my life? And another thing to think about is the way our brain works. Our brains, I don't remember the person who said this, but it's really wise. It says that our brains are like Teflon, like non-stick pans for the positive things of life. And they're like Velcro for the negative. Our brains are designed to hold on to those negative things, partially out of survival. If you are in a situation where you see something hurt someone else, you're going to want to know to avoid that in the future. So, that is a piece that is necessary, but there is so much that happens in a given day, so many beautiful moments that if we're stuck in resentment, if we're stuck in focus on that negative, then we're not going to see it and it just totally zaps our joy. Whereas if we're in a place of openness, of forgiveness, of open heartedness, we can move to a place of gratitude where we can focus on those positive things that we see, all the beauty around us. And there is so much more than we can ever even take in. And I think that's that shift is to open heartedness and willingness to look at the positive and see it.
100%. And you speak of finding a sacred rhythm in life. What does that feel like in the body? And how do we know when we are out of sync with it?
Yes. So for me, there's a couple pieces of this. First is a surrender of one's life to the divine. And for me, I'm a Christian. And so I talk about that as the Holy Spirit. But this is true in every world of religion I've encountered and studied, that divine power can work in and guide us. Um, Even those who just go more spiritual, there's some sort of inner self, higher self that guides. So I think all spiritual followers on the planet have some sort of way to describe that. And if we believe that we're surrendered to that inner guidance, that guidance from, in my case, the Holy Spirit, then we allow ourselves to be lived, to have that divine power work through us. And that can create balance in and of itself. So there's a couple ways I look for balance, to know that I'm surrendered, that I'm in alignment with where I need to be. The first is through emotions. So whenever you're in a place of fear, sadness, anxiety, those sorts of negative emotions, that's a really good sign that you're not in alignment with where you need to be. Typically, you're in that place of believing you're separate from the divine, that you're separate from the people around you, that you have to fight, you have to make something right, you have to control it. And that puts us in a place where we're not in alignment. So anytime we feel those emotions, that's an immediate sign, okay, something's not right. And whenever I feel those things, I take a pause. And for me, I use meditation. I sit in stillness and I listen because when we pray, and prayer is a beautiful practice, we're speaking to the divine. And when we meditate in our hearts, maybe not in our heads, but in our hearts, we are listening. And we could ask that, okay, I feel something's not right. Can you show me where I'm resisting something that I need to not be resisting? Can you show me where I'm trying to control something that I shouldn't be controlling? Can you show me where I'm holding on to something I need to let go of? Where is this off? And just listen. And usually you can kind of feel, and it takes practice, but at this point I can feel pretty quickly, oh, this is where the problem is. And I can release and come back to peace. And when I'm in peace and joy in those emotions, that's a really good sign that I'm exactly where I need to be. The other piece is balance in life. So often we think that more is needed from us than is actually needed. I think we put so many expectations on ourselves that are not of the divine, that God is not asking us to do, that we are asking of ourselves. And I think that's important too. If ever you feel overwhelmed, to pray and to ask, is this something that I'm trying to do? And maybe I could be a little easier on myself, or is this something I'm really supposed to be doing? And sometimes the answer is yes, you're supposed to be doing that thing, and you have a day's schedule. It's this packed, and you have to get it all in. And in that case, stop trying to do it. Just say, okay, God, if this is your will, if this is what you want, if this is what you need from me today, then work through me and just allow it to happen. Don't resist it and just let it flow. And inevitably, it'll be the smoothest thing ever. And you just, end of the day, look back and say, wow, that was beautiful. So, again, so much of our suffering, so much of our pain comes from a couple different things: resisting what is, trying to control life, and expectations that we have of things that we don't need to have. So I think that's most of the answer. The only thing I can think of is rhythm of just daily rhythm. So for me, I wake up and immediately sit down to meditate for about 20 to 30 minutes, 15, 10 on a really busy day, and just set myself into that place of calm to start the day. And at lunchtime, I take another 10, 15 minutes to recenter, and then before bed again. So I kind of bookend my day with that presence and that check-in so that I don't get too far off from my center. And that rhythm of things helps me to stay in my peace.
That's great. And what roles do nature and mindfulness play in restoring that inner alignment?
Yeah. That's the piece that I felt like I didn't have in that last answer, and you just called it out at me. So thank you. There's rhythms, there's cycles in nature, and that I think we need to allow and recognize. There is a beautiful thing someone said to me this winter. I live in the mid-Atlantic of the United States, so it's not super cold, but it gets below freezing. And um, I was with a group of people, and this one woman said, one thing I'm learning is to not fight my body's call to be still and to kind of hibernate. That I think certain times of the year that we have more energy, because maybe like this time of year for me, it's summer where I live, and it's very warm and the sun's up most of the day, and I have so much more energy. And so this is a time when I do a lot more. Whereas in the wintertime, I think there's that natural balance where maybe this is a time to give yourself some more grace, to maybe spend some more time in reflection, in meditation, in prayer, in extra rest for your body, whatever that is, maybe more self-care. And so just kind of following the rhythms of the seasons and being aware of the rhythms of nature and not fighting against it. And again, that requires a deep inner listening to feel that. And sometimes those happen and it's not with the rhythms of nature. Maybe you're sick with a summer cold and your body's saying, hey, I'm done right now. I can't do X, Y, and Z. Well, listen to it. Maybe take that day off of work and just rest and enjoy instead of complaining that you're sick. I've learned to shift that to thank you for the opportunity to just rest today. I'm just enjoying being still and just taking care of my body and giving my body what it needs. So that certainly helps. And then spending time in nature. I go for walks every day. I have a dog now, and I realized as soon as I got my dog, I no longer had seasonal depression because I only had minor seasonal depression, but it was there. And I think in the wintertime, I'm getting out 3 times a day to walk her. I'm in nature, and nature is very grounding. It's very calming. It's very soothing to the mind and the soul. And the more we spend time in nature, there's all kinds of ways you can do that. Going for a walk, just putting your feet in the grass, just getting fresh air, opening the windows, looking at watching the sunrise or the sunset. And this goes back to what I was talking about with forgiveness, that there is so much beauty in our lives. I mean, even in a busy inner city, there's still birds. There's still a tree or a park, or there's something that we can look at and just feel the breeze on our face and watch a child smile. Like there is endless blessings around us, but we have to be able to be open to it and take it in. So where is your mind focused? And when you're in nature, it helps you to focus on those positive things, opens your heart to gratitude, and gives you that grounding feeling of security and safety that our souls need.
It's powerful how returning to breath or the sound of bird song can recalibrate the whole nervous system.
Yeah, for sure. It is. I know that there's a book, I forget the name of the book, but it was a woman who would take trauma survivors out into nature for I think it was a week or two. And it was like kind of glamping, so it wasn't super rugged, but they were in nature, secluded in an area that they could just be away from all technology and all of the things that usually weigh them down, their jobs and housework and all that kind of stuff, and just be in nature. And I forget the number of days it took, but she said across the board, almost every single person that she took out on these trips would just notice that the stress would just melt away. And then nature, just being in nature, seemed to be like a tuning, like an instrument, like you were describing, like almost like a violin or a cello, where you tune the strings and all of a sudden it's back into harmony. I think we are we're a part of that. And when we separate and isolate ourselves from the nature around us, that causes us to be increasingly out of balance. And so it is like tuning an instrument, like tuning our inner instrument. When we spend time in nature, it's so healing to the body.
Absolutely. And for those who resist meditation, especially when sitting in silence brings up pain, what gentle entry points do you recommend?
Yes. So if you are in a place of trauma, and I've been there briefly in my grief journey when my husband passed, right after he passed, and also when he was in the hospital. There were a couple of times in my life where I was in a traumatic situation. And even though I was a practiced meditator, meditating was not helpful. It's only a couple of days of my life that this is true. But if you are in a place where you are recovering from trauma, I don't recommend starting with silence because you have a lot in your system and your body that needs to come up and out before you can sit without causing further aggravation. So it needs to be a gentle entry. So if that's you, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, meditation just seems so scary to me because if I sit in silence, I'm going to have all this come up. Um, I would recommend starting with just a simple walk in nature with maybe some relaxing non-vocal music playing, instrumental, and just maybe have that in your earbuds, one earbud in, one earbud out. You listen to the birds. Just do that for like a few weeks and just take a half hour just to be present with nature. Maybe have that musical input to just keep you calm. And then gradually, maybe if you're seeing a therapist, to have some of that talk therapy. There's a lot of other beautiful therapies I've heard of, like EDM. Yeah, I don't know the initials, but there's different therapies out there that are really, really good for healing trauma and that sort of thing. But once you get to that point where things are a little bit calmer, I'd recommend guided meditations. Although I don't really use them anymore, they're very, very helpful for helping the mind to learn to still, to give it a focus point, and to feel like you're not alone with your thoughts because you have a gentle voice guiding you into that peace, into that stillness. And so, starting with that, I'm a Christian meditation teacher, and my YouTube channel has dozens of these. But there are a lot, depending on your faith background, there's a ton of different options out there for you. I highly recommend, doing a YouTube search or getting a meditation app and starting there. And then as you begin to feel more and more comfortable with that stillness, you can find meditations with longer and longer pauses where you can be and just rest. And then finally, when you're ready for just stillness, my personal preference, and there's a lot of different meditation methods out there, and I'm not saying that mine is the be all and end all. However, my personal preference is to bring my attention to my heart center, to feel the love of God and to rest in God's arms. For me, instead of trying to silence the mind, I find if I focus on the love of God, that automatically kind of silences the mind. And it's a very peaceful place to just rest. And so hopefully that's a nice guide from the crazy monkey mind or the very strong emotions all the way down to that deep inner stillness. And then the last thing I would say on that is that the strong benefits of meditation. And there have been mindfulness and meditation both have huge benefits for the brain. And I think it's something like 10 to 20 minutes a day for a couple months. The prefrontal cortex gets larger, which is where our critical thinking happens and processing. And the amygdala, the fight flight response center gets smaller. So even just a couple months of just a little bit of meditation every day, there's discernible differences. And I can say when I started meditating, it was a huge, huge difference in the quality of my life in just a couple months, to the point that my children started coming to me and saying, Mom, something's different in you. What's different? So it works. And it's the best decision I've ever made, is number one, to surrender to God, and number two, to spend time in that love every day.
That's beautiful. And can movement, creativity, or silence in nature also count as meditation in your view?
Yes. Well, silence in nature is a form of meditation because you're in that place of gratitude. So I think you said music and I think creativity. So when I'm a high school teacher and I talk to my students about mindfulness, I would not say those things are meditation, but they are mindfulness. And it does become a place where the thoughts of our mind have to become calm because we're very highly focused. When you're listening to music, you're focused on the music and you're at a place of non-judgment. You're listening to the music. Usually you're not saying, oh, this is a bad song or a good song. You're just in it. You're in the music. And if you're playing a sport, you're focusing on, doing the movement, like you're dancing or doing martial arts or whatever, and not so much in a place of judgment of it, but just judgmental observation, just observing. And that's a place of mindfulness, and that is highly beneficial. Um, I do believe that meditation, that inner listening, though, is most beneficial for character change. So if we're looking to develop inner peace and to develop more control over our thoughts, things like that, I do believe that meditation is more valuable. And meditating in nature is the top of my list. I mean, that's just wow. The benefits of that are huge. But yes, doing those other forms of creativity, listening to music, running, walking, those sorts of things are great places to start, to begin to calm the mind and to begin to train the mind. It's a great starting point.
There's beauty in redefining meditation as something that meets us rather than something we must master.
Yes. Meditation, yes, is where the divine comes to us and rests in us and with us and is a guide. It is absolutely something that we don't need to do, Um, but honestly, once you begin and you form a practice, you won't want to not do it. It'll become, for me, it is the most important part of my life in the sense that if I'm doing that, everything else is just an absolute blessing. And if I'm not in alignment, if I don't take that time to meditate, my other pieces of my life kind of fall apart because that inner guidance isn't as strong and isn't as clear. And so I think when we develop that habit and that rhythm, the sacred rhythm, as you said, in our lives, that provides the guidance and that anchor point for everything else. We absolutely need it. So, yes, God meets us there. And so it's not something we have to do. It's a gift, it's an honor to do it. And it's where we can live as our best selves when we take the time to do that.
Definitely. So, Leah, thank you for reminding us that the peace of pace is not found in the rush of achievement, but in the rhythm of trust, forgiveness, and gentle presence. And to our listeners, may you find stillness in your breath, softness in your heart, and rhythm in your soul. This is Sacred Harmony, where healing isn't forced, it's remembered.